The world watched as the door closed. Inside the Grand Lodge in Kananaskis, Alberta, the leaders of the world's most powerful democracies sat in stunned silence. President Donald Trump had left the G7 summit a day early, citing an escalating crisis between Israel and Iran. But his abrupt exit sent a louder message. America was stepping back from its traditional leadership role. The agenda was thrown into chaos. What was the point of a G7 without its most powerful member? Leaders like Germany's Friedrich Merz and Japan's Shigeru Ishiba exchanged uneasy glances. Trump's early exit meant missing crucial meetings and refusing to back a unified statement on Ukraine. Ukrainian President Zelensky warned that global diplomacy was now in crisis. The unity that defined the G7 for decades was gone, replaced by a vacuum of leadership. The remaining leaders faced a choice: accept defeat or try to salvage something from the wreckage. The world was watching, waiting to see if the G7 would collapse under American indifference. Who, if anyone, would step into the void and lead? The answer would come from an unexpected place. Amid the confusion, one leader moved with purpose. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney. This was his first G7, and it was falling apart. Yet, he saw an opportunity. In a firm address, Carney declared, "Nostalgia is not a strategy, the world has changed." He called on the remaining countries, plus partners like South Korea and India, to move forward without waiting for America. Carney's leadership broke the paralysis. He pledged $2 billion in new military aid for Ukraine and announced fresh Canadian sanctions against Russia. This was more than symbolism. It was a direct challenge to the vacuum left by the US. The other leaders, energized by Carney's resolve, rallied around a new center of gravity. French President Macron praised Carney's quick thinking, crediting him with preserving unity. The question was no longer if the G7 could survive, but what this re-energized group could accomplish on its own. Carney showed that leadership is about clarity of purpose, not just power. The summit's tone had shifted. The G7 was no longer waiting for America. A new era was beginning. With American leadership in question, Canada began to redraw its strategic map. Prime Minister Carney unveiled an Arctic-Pacific Defense Pact, aiming to build alliances across both oceans. The first step, a major defense procurement deal with Europe, reducing Canada's reliance on US military hardware. This new transatlantic bridge connected Ottawa directly to European capitals. Looking west, Carney strengthened ties with Japan and South Korea, focusing on maritime security and intelligence sharing. The goal, a united front of democracies to counter rising authoritarianism. Carney also mended fences with India, restoring full diplomatic relations. By expanding its network of partners, Canada was positioning itself as a proactive global player. The message was clear. In this new era, Canada would help lead a web of alliances, not just follow. The old certainties were gone. The G7 was evolving. A new strategic reality was taking shape. The re-energized G7 forged a new economic path centered on resilience. The first major agreement, the Critical Minerals Alliance, securing access to rare earths essential for technology and defense. G7 nations, minus the US, pledged joint investment in new mines and processing facilities, breaking dependence on non-market economies. This alliance aimed to create secure supply chains and counter economic coercion, the second pillar technology. The leaders issued a joint statement on AI and quantum computing, pledging to set ethical standards and cooperate on research. The focus shifted from pure free market globalization to strategic cooperation and economic security among allies. The summit also produced agreements on migrant smuggling and wildfire cooperation. The G7 was not abandoning global trade but rethinking it. The new model prioritized resilience, security, and shared values. These moves marked a profound shift in global economic governance. The G7 was building a future on its own terms. As the 2025 G7 summit ended, the world faced a new question. Was this the dawn of a post-American G7? The image of the empty American chair symbolized the end of an era, but the lasting image may be Canada and its partners stepping forward to fill the void. The Arctic-Pacific Pact, Critical Minerals Alliance, and new defense deals were the first building blocks of a different global architecture. These initiatives were designed to function with or without American participation. For countries like Canada, Germany, and Japan, this was a moment of both opportunity and risk. They now face the challenge of taking greater responsibility for their own security and economic destiny. The 2025 summit may be remembered as the turning point when America's allies stopped waiting for Washington to lead. Leadership, they proved, is a choice. The next chapter of global order is just beginning.